Welcome to the Ambassador Baseball Show. My name is Cole Cleveland, and today we're going to continue our series that we have titled Rethinking Athletics. Over the last few episodes, we have discussed the reality that youth sports has become much more than just sports. It has become a culture. It has become a worldview. It has become an entire system that is shaping families and shaping priorities and ultimately shaping worship. It is shaping the way that we view our children. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the most influential people in all of youth athletics, and that is the role of the parent. And before we begin that discussion, I want to acknowledge a few things. Most parents genuinely love their children. Most dads want what is best for their sons. Most moms want their daughters to succeed. Most parents even sacrifice a tremendous amount of time and energy and money for their children because they care very deeply about their children. Okay? The problem here that we're going to define is not a lack of love. The problem is that love without biblical wisdom can still create a tremendous amount of damage in the life of the child, in the life of the parent, and in the life of the home. And nowhere is that more obvious than in youth athletics. One of the most important truths that a parent can understand is this right here. God never called parents to raise athletes. God called parents to raise disciples. And that important distinction will change your approach. Because when the goal becomes raising an athlete, then athletics naturally becomes central. But when the goal is raising a disciple, athletics becomes the tool that serves a greater purpose. The question is no longer, how good can my child become at their sport? The question now becomes, what kind of person is my child becoming in the sport, through the sport, by the sport? And that's a very different question. And unfortunately, many parents today have unknowingly allowed athletics to become the primary environment where their child receives affirmation, where their child receives purpose, their identity. I see this constantly. I mean, parents become emotionally invested in every success of their child. They become emotionally devastated by every failure of their child on the field. They become emotionally consumed by every decision, good or bad, that their child makes on a playing surface. And eventually something happens. I mean, the parent's identity becomes tied to the child's performance. And when that happens, youth sports becomes very dangerous because now every at-bat matters too much. Every tournament weighs too heavily. Every roster decision that the coach makes matters too greatly. The child is no longer simply playing a game. The child is carrying the emotional expectations of the parent on their shoulders. And that is a burden that children were not meant to carry. And parents will often use the excuse, and it is a reality. They'll say, well, I just want my child to succeed so badly. But sometimes what we call support is actually unbiblical pressure. Sometimes what we call encouragement is actually unrealistic expectation. Sometimes what we call opportunity is actually fear. Fear that our child will fall behind. Fear that another family will get ahead of us. fear that we're not doing enough, fear that we're going to miss out. And fear is a terrible motivator because fear never says you've done enough. Fear always says more, more tournaments, more lessons, more travel, more showcases, more money, more sacrifice, more pressure. And eventually the family becomes trapped in a cycle that never ends. The irony is that many parents entered athletics hoping it would benefit their child, but instead athletics begins to control the entire household. Schedules begin to revolve around sporting events. Vacations revolve around sports. Conversations revolve around sports. Emotions revolve around athletic events. Everything is revolving around that child's sport. What started as a gift slowly becomes the master. Now let me ask you a difficult question. What happens when your child fails? And I didn't say if, I said when. What happens when your child fails? Because failure is coming. Every athlete strikes out. Every athlete loses. Every athlete will be disappointed in themselves. Every athlete will face adversity. And one of the greatest gifts that a parent can give a child is teaching them how to fail well. Modern parenting often tries to eliminate failure altogether. Biblical parenting teaches that children can and should respond to failure well. And so when we are parenting in a biblical manner, we are training our child who fails how to do so biblically. And this idea of even gentle parenting or modern parenting or whatever you call it, that is basically eliminating any sort of failure versus a biblical failure, a biblical response to failure. Those are not the same thing. Okay? Failure can teach you humility. Failure can teach you perseverance. Failure can teach you dependence. Failure can teach you that you are a selfish person. It exposes your pride. Failure reveals the deepest layer of your character, of your heart. And listen, failure so often becomes one of God's greatest tools for growth. And yet, many parents rush to rescue their child from every form of disappointment. They explain away the mistakes. They blame the coaches. They blame the umpires. They blame the other teammates. They blame the circumstances. And when you do that, you are robbing your child of the very lessons that God might be trying to teach them through this adversity. One of the greatest dangers in youth sports is when parents become the defense attorney for every weakness their child possesses. And you know what I'm talking about. You've been around that parent. You might be that parent. Growth rarely occurs when responsibility is constantly shifted somewhere else. The goal is not to protect your child from every struggle. The goal is to prepare your child to navigate struggles biblically. And athletics gives parents countless opportunities to do exactly that. This is one of the reasons that authority matters so much. And we establish this from the beginning of every season with our parents, understanding the role of the coach, the role of the parent, and ultimately the role of authority in the organization. God has established authority throughout all of life. There's structures of authority in the home, in the church, in government, in the workplace, and even in athletics. Yet, one of the defining characteristics of modern youth athletics is the constant undermining of authority. Parents challenge coaches, and worse, parents undermine coaches by gossiping about them on the car ride home. And listen, that is so damaging. I mean, what are you teaching your children about submission to authority? Parents who talk about their kids' coaches to their kids behind their coaches' backs are some of the worst examples of parenting out there. I really do believe that this single problem is one of the main reasons that we are dealing with an entire generation of entitlement, a generation that has issues with authority. Then there's issues of parents challenging officials, not in the car ride home. I'm talking about in public, in front of everyone. Parents challenging organizational decisions and trying to get other parents to go up against the coach, or I mean, it's just amazing what we see. And listen, children are watching all of it. I mean, you have parents that challenge every outcome that is not a benefit for their child. And their child is watching that. I mean, every time a parent publicly undermines authority, the child is learning something. Every time a parent talks about the coach and questions him in the car ride home, the child is learning something. The child is learning how to respond when life doesn't go their way. The child is learning how to handle disappointment. The child is learning how to handle failure. The child is learning whether authority should be respected or resisted. And eventually, those lessons show up in that child's life. And then they show up in the classroom. They show up at work. They show up in their marriage. They show up in the local church. Because listen, athletics is never just athletics. Athletics is training. It is formation. It is discipleship. And that means parents have a tremendous responsibility. The goal is not to create the most successful athlete. The goal is to raise a mature young man or young woman who loves Christ, who respects authority, who works hard, who responds humbly, and who understands that all of life exists for the glory of God. That is success. If athletics helps accomplish that goal, then athletics is serving its proper purpose. But if athletics begins replacing that goal, then something has become totally disordered in your life. In the next episode, we're going to discuss another critical component of youth athletics, and that is the role of the coach. What should a coach actually be? What responsibilities should coaches carry? And what happens when coaches forget their proper role? We'll discuss that next time. Thank you for joining, and thank you for listening to this mini-series as we are redefining and rethinking athletics. And we're doing it under the umbrella of the glory of God. I look forward to joining you on our next conversation.